Well, good morning and welcome to another action-packed, exciting episode of Hidden in the Heartland podcast. I'm Kels Goodman, your host, and with me right next door, literally, I could almost touch him, is Mark Burris from Palmyra, even though he's the other side of the galaxy. How you doing this morning, Mark?
Good. How are you doing?
Great, doing awesome. The weather's getting warmer, and I am ready for summer, ready for a good time. So it should be, this is road trip weather, everyone. Everyone should get in their car and they should start going out to seeing sites that they always heard about, read about, and they need to go search for themselves the elements of those remains that tell us who lived here long before Columbus, who lived in America long before Columbus, because that's the whole goal of what we're doing here on Hidden in the Heartland. And so it's time to get in that car and go and see a site. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a site that you can't go see, or at least you can't really, there's no visitor center for it, or there might be some bumps left over. There might be some places that look like you might be able to see it, but it's not what you think. And it's called the Turner Earthworks. So the Turner Earthworks, I've never been there or seen it, so I'm kind of new to the Turner Earthworks. So what we're going to do today is we won't take too long. We're just going to share a little bit of what we know about the Turner Earthworks. But before we start, I wanted to give a little shout out to our good friend Wayne May, who some of this research that we're going to go over today is from. But he has a conference coming up in uh, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's going to be the 21st and 22nd of June, and it's Land of Promise, and it's going to feature Wayne and a bunch of other good guys who are going to talk about Book of Mormon evidence and discuss. And I'll actually be there. I'm actually decided that I'm going to go. I'm only going to go as a participant, and I'm going to go gather information. And then what we'll do is me and Mark will meet back here and we'll do a little review of what I saw at the conference. And
How do people like find out more about the conference? Do they go on to like Wayne's Facebook page or
yeah, that you can do that, and you can type in Land of Promise Wayne May in Google. And I admittedly forgot the to look up the actual. I'll probably put it on Facebook. I'm going to put an ad on Facebook helping promote it for Wayne. But and he's not really asking me to do this. This is me saying, "Hey, let's go support Wayne and his conference." But it's in Spanish Fort, Utah, and so it's June 21st, 22nd, and at the high school there. But you can sign up for it. I think it's landofpromise.org or .com or something like that. But you'll have to do a Google search. I apologize. I wasn't ready for maybe I'll put it in the description when I put this YouTube video up. So we'll go with that. So anyway, go to his conference, check it out, see what's there. Be skeptical. Go and be skeptical. Always go with skeptic, mind, but then walk away and try to learn something from it. I think it'll be great. And I think they're recorded. I don't know beyond that what happens, but I know they are recorded. And so we'll see where we go from there. But okay, so that is a little push for Wayne May's conference and his magazine. And that's what I'm gonna show you his magazine because that's where the information is today. So I'm gonna pop on the screen share right now, and so here is the Turner Earthworks, ladies and gentlemen, and so this is what it would have looked like is this. And it's kind of interesting. Mark, had you ever heard of the Turner Earthworks before this?
no? I think the first time I heard of it was when you sent me the link to the blog.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
that's it.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is big. It's really big. I mean, that one little strip that says long enclosure, that thing is about a half mile long. And so
Yeah.
you can see this whole set of earthworks is over a mile long. And so it's pretty big. Um, this is what I want to show you is this is Wayne's magazine, Land of Promise. And what he's done is he's kind of evolved from the ancient American magazine that he used to do. I don't think he does it anymore. He might, but I haven't seen it. It seems like he evolved to this one, which is, the ancient American magazine was really focused on kind of general, like you'd see little bits of Book of Mormon stuff in there, and a couple of articles and stuff, but the most of it was just ancient American content. And a lot of it was, there was a relationship between the Ancient American magazine that Wayne did for 20 years or so and the conference that I've talked about over and over, which is the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society. And it was easy for me to call it the Ancient American Preservation Society, but it's not. But it's Ancient Artifact. And so there's a relationship there where a lot of the people who wrote a lot of the articles for Ancient American with Wayne would go to this conference, Ancient Artifact Preservation Society conference in October, which I'm planning on attending. But it's a lot of great content in there. So in this new version of his magazine that he's started, um, it's uh, it's focused more on Book of Mormon content, archaeology. So you'll see, I think a lot of it is when you see the discussion, there's a lot of this. I guess when you're doing Heartland research and defending this concept that the Book of Mormon could have happened in North America, in this area where you have several battles you have to fight. You have several groups, and I hate using the word fight because I don't want to be fighting, right? But you have several people that you have to adhere to. You have those who are not members of the church, who who I more kind of like to talk to, where you're trying to win over people about, hey, there's evidence of the Book of Mormon right here in America, and maybe you ought to give it a try to read the Book of Mormon and you can learn something. Then you have the other group, which is the people who are focused on Mesoamerican studies, and that's a whole nother group that you have to fight. And so that's where you get into the what did Joseph say arguments. Okay, and I hope that's kind of clear that sometimes we have different people that we're trying to convince, and I think a lot of times Heartlanders do so much more focusing on what Joseph Smith said and not on actual archaeology. And so there's, well, Joseph said this and Joseph did this and Joseph knew that was up here, and he said, Zelf's Mound, and he gives us that, which is important information, which is great and it's very important. But I think here at Hidden in the Heartland, at least my personal focus is actual archaeology for all people, for both those who are focused on Mesoamerican and for those who know nothing about the Book of Mormon, and it gives them a little seed of something. So Land of Promise, I think, kind of has leaned to do both, where they're covering both archaeological stuff and what did Joseph say, to kind of keep it the spiritual side in North America as well as the physical side. I'm more like the physical side. I love to see stuff in my hands, and this Turner site is one of those things that we're going to kind of go into. But this is where the content is. There's actually numerous. When I did a little research online, there's actually about 4 places where you can study about the Turner sites. And one of them, the main one, was Wayne May's Land of Promise. But like you should do with all research, you should always find a second and a third source of information. And what was cool was these four places I went to. One of them was a blog spot, which is the one, Mark, that I gave you. Was the this blog spot on the Hopewell Valley of the Mound Builders, Turner Earthworks article, uh, which is what we're going to pull a lot of stuff from today. There's also one called ancientohiotrail.org. So ancientohiotrail.org is another site where they cover many. Ohio is just riddled, obviously, with earthworks. And so that's where I'm pulling some of the sources from. And the other one is another site called CityKin. I think it's .com. I forgot to write on here if it's .com or .org, but CityKin, just like the name city and kin, meaning your ancestors, KIN. Um, and they focus on families and urbanism in Cincinnati, which is fascinating because this is near Cincinnati, and uh, and most of these articles are about 10 years old. So, um, except for this one that Wayne did, which is recent. So, so there's some sources for you for what we're talking about today to show you that it's not just one guy saying it all, and but that there's actual content. But so anyway, so let's roll on forward. Do you remember Ancient American magazine, Mark? Do you remember
Oh
reading
yeah,
those?
yeah. I mean, used to be Ancient American Magazine, and then it would say like the subtitle or whatever, LDS
Yeah,
Special Edition for the ones that only dealt with the Book of Mormon. And I think he had like 7 or 8 issues, and they
yeah,
were all really great. Some had one was about doctrines of salvation, one was on the Michigan tablets,
yeah.
just excellent content. And if you ever get a chance to pick them up and read them, do it because it'll you'll definitely learn some things you never knew before.
I think
Um,
I know at one point he was selling digital copies of them. Um,
yeah, no,
but
I mean, I
he's,
last time I saw the magazines is when I had my bookstore, and that's been
yeah,
we closed in 2019, so it's been a
yeah.
few years.
Darn. I love it. I love paper. I loved it. In fact, that image you saw that I just showed you, that was me scanning my magazine in, but
It looked
I
like a
like it.
scan.
So I like paper. I like to have it in front of me. So
Yeah,
just to kind
it's
of,
nice to be able to highlight, and I think there's something
Mhm.
about being able to remember where things are in the text. There's something very nice and tangible about a real physical. You're talking about physical artifacts and physical books.
Yeah.
They're nice. So,
They're very nice. Well, and that's why you can see I just backed up to that one. You can see my markings all over it. And
yeah.
so which is kind of cool. But
And one of the things I love about these different sites, even though many of them are now under a city or whatever the case may be, it just shows you how vast the Hopewell, system was. They're just all over the place. And one of the benefits I think that Mesoamerica really has is that, the forest took over where some of those cities are, and no one went back and built on top of it.
yeah,
North America, it seems like we wanted to be where the Hopewell were, and we built right on top of them.
that's
Um,
right.
but luckily, a lot of the early work that was done by these amateur archaeologists, we have the drawings of the earthworks, and we know where they were. And luckily, we have artifacts as well from those sites, even though the site may not exist today.
Yeah. No, that's very good. Yeah. We were lucky when Stevens and is it Catherwood? When they went down to Central America in the 1800s, they were able to uh, draw out and do an artistry of all those beautiful places down in Central America. But they also were able to preserve a lot of those, which have not, like you said, we have not been very good at preserving here in America. And because of that, we still seem to go off this notion that America is only a couple hundred years old and that's about it. And we forget that it is much older and that there is a relevance to those who lived here. And it just by happenstance benefits us when it comes to talking about the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
But then it's also super ironic that it's also the place that the people are the most skeptic. It's a skeptic game that we keep playing when it comes to finding things in North America that is ancient versus, you know, Europe or, the Middle East or whatever. Whenever they dig something up, boom, they already know, oh, there's almost like no question whatsoever. And it's already deemed, right and true. And
Yeah.
in America, there's always a skeptic. Well, I don't know. We're going to have to really think this through, and let's let it sit in a box for 100 years while we think about it, and then we're off doing something else.
Yeah,
And
one of the things I find that one of the things that I find that's interesting is that the things that are found in North America, if you date them and you look at the date and you look at the same types of earthworks in Europe, Ireland, wherever the case may be, the same time period around the world, they're building the same types of things,
that's right.
They're at the same technological level. I remember I think I talked to Bruce Porter once and he was like, during the time of Nephi, the wall around Jerusalem wasn't like this cut stone wall. It was more like what we see the Hopewell built. It was like I think in one of his videos, Nephite Explorer, he shows one of those old walls of Jerusalem, like the old, old, old walls, and it's not cut stone. It looks like what the Nephites built. And you're seeing in Mesoamerica, the things that they were building during when you date it, during that dating time period, their pyramids and whatnot are the same kind of technology as what was going on in Indonesia and Thailand and different places like that. It's the same kind of
Yeah.
architecture, but it's from that date, you know, when you look at the Aztecs and the Mayans and their dating time period, it's the same.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I mean, a lot of the stuff in North America, people say, well, it's not very impressive because it's just an earthwork and it's just this and it's just that. Well, during the same time period, those are the same types of um, things that were being produced in other parts of the world. That's kind of where
Yeah.
we were technologically. So
Good point. So here's the United States, kind of the proposed areas of Book of Mormon lands. Most of it due to the fact that this black dot that I just put up here is represents Palmyra, which is where Mark is right now, and that black dot, and that's by the land of many waters up there, those Finger Lakes. And then here's the dot down here near Cincinnati, which is where this site that we're going to talk about today is. What I like to do is I like to kind of put in perspective whenever we find these places, kind of the only reason I bring up Hilcomora is it's the North Star. It's what we know. If we go off of what we know in church history, we know that the Hill Cumorah is the Hill Cumorah. And unless something changes, unless the church comes out, or unless there's some revelation, or unless there's some other information, that's the Hill Cumorah. And we can argue day and night about it, but I that is one of those North Stars that while I find I'm open-minded to anything anywhere in the United States or even in Central South America. There's only one North Star, and that, in my opinion, and that's the Hill Cumorah. And we won't hash that today, but that's just a reminder as to put
yeah,
in
we could
perspective.
do 5 or 6 episodes just on the hill, Kimura and
Yeah,
Kimura, and it's like there's just tons on it. So yeah.
that's right. So we could go on and on, but so we know that it's about 500 miles, which is about a 15-day walk. If you're into that, you can really get your miles in, get your steps in, and so that's about the length of time. that it would take to go to this site from Hill Cumorah. So just to put that in perspective, and of course we have different places, possibilities of narrow necks of land, but which is all around this watered area. But yeah, so there we are. So there it is. So here it is. It's in Newton, Ohio, and it's off of Round Bottom Road. So,
Mm.
which whoever named that one probably was drunk. Who
That's
knows?
a
But
that's an ancient Hopewell, you know, they'd name everything round bottom, the
that's
Hopewell.
Fat Bottom Road. So, or whatever, Round Bottom Road. But it's and here's what's interesting is so here it is. This is the proposed kind of area, and one of the traces that helps them know where this was is the Little Miami River. And one thing to remember about the little, so on the top of this image, you can see there's the river and there's the Little Miami, and this is the old artistry on top of the map. And one thing just I'm just going to throw out, who remembers what else the Little Miami River was used on? What other earthwork was it near? It was near the Menorah Mound. And so if you remember the Menorah Mound, it too has the Little Miami River drawn on the top of it. And that's where people have tried to kind of pinpoint where the Menorah Mound was, because it too has been flattened and by the curve of the Little Miami River. So that's where I think there are certain remnants of the earthwork that supposedly is still there. It would be fun to drive over there someday and do a. I did the, you know what's funny is I did the same with the Menorah Mound. We Steph and I on one of our road trips, we actually went to the location where we think the Menorah Mound could have been by going to the river and looking at the proposed coordinates, and we had a hard time find because you can't see it from the ground. You gotta have a drone. I didn't have a drone at the time or something. You got to have some way of being able to go up and look down. Oh, okay, here's a hump here, so this could have been that, or here's this bump here right next to the Burger King, and it could have been that. Who knows? And so we tried to do that, and it was hard to really find. It was really hard to see it, but we tried and we tried, I couldn't really pinpoint that. I'm wondering if the Turner Earthworks you can see better, if there's a better like if the indentation might be a little more clear.
And it
But
sometimes can be hard because rivers will change, you know?
exactly, that's a
So like
good
on
point.
this map, you can see that the river might have been wider
Yeah,
back when they were comparing it to this map from 1932. So you're comparing a map against a map against a map. Um,
exactly.
so it's just one of those difficult things. And if we ever are really able to do an exact pinpoint, that's why it's a huge blessing that they were able to pull artifacts out when they did.
That's right.
Um, because who knows if we can go. I mean, other than, if there were any metals left behind or any, I mean, maybe with LiDAR, I don't know. So,
Yeah, that would be interesting to find. But now it's people's property, and so there's not much you can do about it.
yeah.
But in the late 1800s, they did something about it. This is around 1880s, and that's what we'll see here in just a minute. But so the point in this one, so here's the map. Here's the actual image that's been drawn. Just a few facts about it. It's less than a mile from Oddfellows Cemetery mounds. It's hard to see how it looks because the site's been completely destroyed by gravel mining operations, which happened after World War II. So and all four sources I read, it was really actually nice to see a full explanation as to what happened and where it went. But the menorah mound, it's a constant battle to get the full truth as to why the menorah mound was mowed down. Because I keep hearing different sources. This one is very clear as a bell that they were mining gravel. And when they did that, it was right after World War II, and they went right through there to get what they needed. And obviously, the earthwork was not as important to them as the gravel. And so at the time, so it was probably a depression related. Sometimes during the depression, a lot of things were needed, and they had to survive. But this is a fairly big set of earthworks, and this was discovered. I don't know if it was discovered, but it was cataloged by a guy named Frederick Putnam. No relation to Putnam County, which is one of my favorite when it comes to in New York. There's no relationship to it, but and another guy named Dr. Charles Metz, and both of these guys were able to go in, and they over the course of probably 20 years went all through these mounds and pulled up everything they could in an effort to preserve them. And they found all kinds of stuff, which we're going to see here in just a minute. But I just wanted to let you see this. A lot of times when you see these drawings, you think of, we think of Squire and Davis, and that Squire and Davis, this would be, but this did not make it in the Squire and Davis book. Whether they knew it existed or not, I haven't seen a relationship whether Squire and Davis ever saw this site or not. I don't know. Maybe some of you guys know, but I don't really know. But you can see the date on here is 1887 by the Turner Group of Earthworks, which is what they kind of named. Michael Turner, I think, was the owner of some of the land, and in this area, and you can see the date on there, 1887, is when they were started the process of taking everything out, and eventually went to the Peabody Museum, which is in Harvard, and to this day, that's where the artifacts still are, and are in that at least we know of. So, and then here's the shapes. These are interesting shapes. You had, well, in this previous one, you had one called the Great Enclosure, which is about 1,500 feet long, and about I think no, I'm sorry, this is the long enclosure. It's a half a mile long. This thing is a half mile long, and it's about 250 feet wide. So it kind of puts in perspective the size. It's almost like a city block right there, in the size of that one, or more than a city block actually. But a long set of it's a trench that went all through there, and then here's the upper one. There's a great enclosure is 1,500 feet long and about 950 feet wide, and then it had these circles inside of it. There's a graded way, elevated circle, so that area in there was elevated. So whether it was in a religious setting or whether it was a king, like because that circle in the middle was elevated, whether that was something that showed higher authority, in this certain location, whether it was, meaning that's where, a king would have lived, or the leader of this certain area would have been at. But either way, that circle is a little elevated. And so it showed that was possibly, where authority lived. So anyway, so there's that, and trying to figure out if there's any other facts on that. Okay, so here's a graphic depiction. So you can see, if you can see on here, there's how it's elevated over there, and then there's that little groove that goes to the river. So there could have been some level of transport, maybe the use of the water, the coming in through there. It was definitely a a place where people probably were that was somewhat populated, and they really used the land really well, and they were able to use the water to their advantage.
Yeah,
And
the
so
waterways were the highways.
that's
I,
right.
I saw an article the other day that they had found some ancient canoes like in North America. Seems
Is
like
that right?
every day they're finding. I mean, they dated them to like 15,000 years old, but I don't know how some of the things they date. I don't.
There's actually canoes down in Tennessee. If you go, I think I forgot which city it is. It's not Nashville. I think it was Memphis, but it's one of the cities in Tennessee where they have in the museum, they have that, they have a couple of canoes, those
Mhm.
long old canoes. Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. Yeah, totally.
I think that like that river very well there could have been back and forth with the menorah mound, you
Hmm.
know. Like it seems like this earthwork has some fortification in it. We know that a lot of times when there's like a ramp like that, it can be leading to like a temple. You
Yeah,
know, we've seen that with other Hopewell sites, but you know, who knows?
yeah, it's
Like
flattened
it would
enough.
be like the figurines that you will see later. Like were those toys or were those used for religious purposes? We don't know. You know, it's almost too bad that these guys don't have more records that were left behind.
Yeah,
Um, we do have one of their records, but it's just too bad that a lot of the sites we have to kind of make an educated guess, and we may be wrong, you know,
totally.
80% of the time. So
Well, here's this is from the Ancient Ohio Trail.org article. This is interesting. Um, it says two mounds. Let's see. It talks about Round Bottom Road east from Newtown, and some of the segments, and they do date this to Hopewell. So this is definitely a Hopewell dated item. Um, and they say from here came some of the Hopewell culture's most spectacular artistry, which we're going to see here in a minute, including clay figurines, the mica serpent, and an effigy of a strange horned creature, which we're gonna look at here in just a minute. But as far as the mound is concerned, it says here are two enclosures, one high, one low, were connected by a graded way. A long form trailed to the southwest. There were several mounds, but most unusual was the symmetrical cluster faced together by rings of stone. Dr. Charles Metz of Madisonville and Frederick Putnam, who we mentioned, of Harvard, investigated at Turner's mounds in the 1800s and found some of the Hopewell culture's most spectacular artistry. Plowing off the earthworks had begun as early as 1825, and it eventually was all destroyed by graveling operation. So, two mounds in this cluster contained remarkable secrets. In one, fires were lit in complex clay lined pits and chambers. Intense heat and smoke could rise through the narrow flutes. In an adjoining mound, a magnificent mica snake lay atop ritual deposits. Mica often cloaked such deposits. So here is some of those fine mica items. I don't know how physically big they are. I haven't really done a measurement on it, but here is beneath the mica serpent were painted pottery statues showing how people dressed and arranged their hair. So we're going to show that in a minute. But here's the mica. Um, you see the snake on the big one, and of course we know that the snake is well represented in Hopewell culture. Um, and also the serpent, we see it in the serpent mound. So the serpent is definitely something you see on a regular basis, but this is broken apart mica. And then on the left, you can see little strips of ones that were found. The top is you see bears, which is interesting, and you see the bears are like it's like they got them cut, and so there's three bears sitting there that at least we can tell of, and then there's the horn-faced dude, and so which is really fascinating, and who that is, I have no idea. So, but the bears were pretty common. Um,
I like the eyes on the bears. I think it's fun that some
yeah,
of that stuff's been preserved, in their nose.
yeah,
And you can see that the artist has added fur on the ears a little bit, like they're fun. Like it's
yeah, and it's kind of interesting because the one article we read kind of poo-pooed the guys going into the uh, going into it because they said that, oh, they were just after the artifacts. They went after the relics. They took them and they took them to Harvard, and then they're locked away, never to be seen. So whether they were able to be seen or not is hard to tell. Um, but the bears is definitely something that they say can be seen, is a uh, regular thing throughout. So here's the next one. So down on the bottom, you see those are actually bear's teeth. Those two white things hanging there. So those actually bear's teeth, and there's stuff inside of them. See, what is it here? These grizzly bear teeth inlaid with pearls. And so grizzlies, I don't know if they're indigenous to this area. That's really interesting. And so there could have been some trading going on. Um, but these are all items that you could actually go to the Peabody Museum today
what
and you could
wasn't there
see.
like copper bracelets as well? So we're
Yes.
seeing some metal work.
The bracelets I forgot to put on here, but on the pictures. But yeah, there is definitely a you're able to that they
That
had
that
bracelets
seems
along them.
pretty common. Like even like where the Bat Creek Stone was found, and the story of the Bat Creek Stone, I think it's an amazing stone. But when you look at the other artifacts that were found in the burials, but it's funny how most of these sites they're finding copper.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was younger reading the Book of Mormon, I'm like, this thing mentions copper an awful lot. Don't get it.
Yeah.
Like it's just copper this and copper that. Like there's just several times where it mentions copper, and that's one of those little things that I think that was left in to give us evidence, because it's just
Yeah.
kind of odd. It's an oddity. But almost every site, they're just like, oh well, oh, and there's some copper bracelets. Oh, and there's this copper thing, and oh,
And I don't know what this man is. This man is actually a depiction of this last little image on the right. It was definitely there were a lot of figures that were found at the site. This is the only picture I have of this specific figure. Wayne May, I think, has a few in his magazine that were seen in that magazine. But this is interesting. These are some of those figures. These are drawings of some of those figures. And it was really kind of interesting that you can see what kind of, you know, what were you, what kind of people they were. This kind of is a pretty good depiction, I would say, as to, if this is who the Hopewell were. Let me read a little something here that I've got about the Hopewell. Um, or well, this first off, it says here that Frederick Putnam, he uncovered a wonderful variety of artifacts crafted from copper, mica, and other exotic materials. Of particular note are a series of small ceramic figurines representing Hopewell men and women in various poses. Now, these figurines give us an intimate view of the past, revealing clothing and hairstyles, jewelry, and a sense of how these ancient people viewed themselves. So that was really kind of a fascinating revelation because you don't see many things of how they see themselves. It's almost like taking a picture of themselves and leaving it in the, or drawing a doll of themselves or something, and
Like
leaving
the
it in the,
it's like the
you know,
Hopewell Barbie doll. They know like
yeah,
how
that
people
that's
dressed and
how
what kind of occupations they had, and you know.
they were all shaped like this, you know. So yeah, I'm sure that that was you know, when you see, yeah, if you were to take a Barbie doll and bury it, and then 1,000 years from now they'll say, look, that's all humans were this thin. They were just like this. So, and they had blonde hair like that, but or whatever. One
But
last,
it's really interesting. Like it's fun to me the things that that made it. You know, like these
yeah,
little figurines, they made it, and they were even saying early 1820s people had started to get into this site and pull whatever they wanted from it. And it wasn't until the 1880s that they were able to get these artifacts out. So, like, but this is what was left over. Can you imagine what was pulled before the figurines? And someone was
yeah,
probably like, oh, you know, maybe they threw them back because they just weren't
yeah.
where they weren't of any interest.
They were just, yeah, whatever. Yeah,
But
these are the,
it's interesting to me that these artifacts are in Harvard. Like, how many of these are available? If you're doing research, what do you ask for? Do they even let people look at look at this stuff? Or is it just that it was published in the 1880s or whenever this was published and that's it? We're not gonna ever see these things again. So
yeah, no, exactly.
sort of like what was pulled up out of Western New York. The story of Willard Bean finding a sword at the Smith farm and donating it, and no one can find it now.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
in the museums around, and who knows where it is, but
Well, and all of the arrowheads that were found all around Hill Cumorah, you know,
yeah,
where are those? You know, that should be on display. That should be for all to see, but those have long since gone.
yeah.
And you know, I think what's interesting, let me kind of give a little, this is a little shout out to Wayne and thank him for allowing us to see this. This is a little quickie explanation on this article from City Kin about the Hopewell. The culture known to archaeologists as the Hopewell may be the most widely discussed but least understood ancient culture in Ohio, if not the entire eastern United States. Existed in Ohio from about 100 BC to 500 AD. Bam, right there in Book of Mormon time. The major Hopewell sites are geometric and hilltop enclosures along with burial mounds. For the most part, these sites are found in the river valleys of central and southern Ohio. Other groups in the Ohio Valley and eastern North America had contact with Ohio Hopewell, but they did not often build earthworks. One of the great concentrations of mounds and earthworks occurs in West Ohio in the drainages of the Miami and Little Miami rivers. Perhaps I should say occurred, many are now destroyed. So, which is really fascinating and very true that you're seeing a lot of these earthworks, which were amazing, such as this one, and how they've been destroyed. And so, with them being destroyed, comes the notion of how do we find them, and that's why the only way we can learn more about those is through history, is through being able to read the books and to go and see the remaining leftover artifacts and at least try to piece together the best that we can, that we know that something was here, somebody was here, some groups were here, and in a lot of cases they were probably religious. In a lot of cases they could have easily been Christian. That, there's little evidence of that. We're still kind of figuring that out, piecing that together, but I know there's definitely that theory, and it's a good possibility. We may never know, but we at least know that we can try to research. So anyway, Well, there you go. There's the Turner Mounds. Just as a little heads up, one of the things we're going to look at doing in the future, my wife Stephanie has been doing research on the Constitution and the evolution of it from Native Americans, and she's been doing some really cool research about, um, especially right now as we're reading about the reign of judges in the Book of Mormon. That there is some ties to that, to some older Native American stories about them evolving their governments into what and ideas that went to Thomas Jefferson about to the Constitution. So hopefully we'll talk about that. If you've got information on that, get it ready, and we'll discuss that soon. But coming up, of course, as a reminder, is Wayne May's conference, and when I come back, I'll probably have a report on that. That's probably the next time that we'll probably meet. But anyway, thank you for joining us again today on Hidden in the Heartland. You know, if you've got ideas of things you want us to go into, we're hoping to ramp up more podcast episodes soon and more content and maybe even some travel. So, which will be coming up. All right, Mark. Well, it's good to see you again on this awesome day. And we'll go ahead and uh, we'll stop out for now, but we'll see you again soon on Hidden in the Heartland podcast.